Welcome back. Cody Roark is with us talking about the Denver Broncos. Of course, the draft is over, and the Broncos were able to, in football terms, call an audible as a basically consensus top 10 talent. And Jahdae Barron, the Texas cornerback, drops to number 20 as a certain, some guys moved up. The tight ends went a little sooner than people expected. Colson Loveland went ahead of Tyler Warren. Some of those changes. The beneficiaries, perhaps, were the Broncos, who watched Barron continue to tumble and realizing the talent there was so much that they couldn't even bring themselves to pass up on him, even though Omarion Hampton and Travion Henderson, as we talk about in the trades, right? When coaches say, we're going to take the best player available, they really mean the best player available in a position of need. Maybe not. Maybe that's exactly what the Broncos did this time when they added Jahdae Barron.
Yeah, look, and I think the whole conversation that people have about, their own personal mock drafts that they put out there or their own boards, teams' boards are different, and Omarion Hampton might have been number one on, let's say Joe's board that he has sitting at home. But for the Broncos, it necessarily was not the case there. If that were the case, they would have taken him. They weren't afraid of missing out on Omarion Hampton, even though, hey, he's a talented player. And he lands in your AFC West division rival Los Angeles Chargers there alongside Najee Harris there in Los Angeles. But, Jahdae Barron is just another chess piece here for the Broncos defense to deploy. And we all saw last year what happened in the game. Pat Surtain got knocked out of the Chargers game early on in the season with a concussion. How they performed without him there. We saw what it was like when Riley Moss went down with a knee injury. And, you had the Levi Wallace experiment for a while, and when Riley came back from that knee injury, he had an up and down game against the Bengals. He had really tight coverage. There wasn't really an instance where he got smoked or burnt the way that people are saying. He had tough coverage that, unfortunately, a guy on the other team made better plays in terms of the catching department, T. Higgins. So, Jahdae Barron, he's just going to bring a lot of versatility to this defense. And what I mean by that is you talk about a guy who could play outside corner in your base package if you need him to. He can play in the nickel if you need him to. He can play as a dime linebacker if you need him to. He can play as a safety if you need him to. This is a guy here that is multifaceted in a way where he can play all these different positions, and it's not going to necessarily impact the Broncos cornerback room in a negative manner.
Yeah, I mean, considered a leader. Sean Payton was talking about how much he appreciated Barron's on his initial call that he'd been drafted. He wanted to address the entire room so he could thank the scouting department, everyone who got him to the NFL and to the Denver Broncos. And Payton said he had never even heard that before in his experience, and he's been around a while. So you're not worried about him, with the room. He's obviously a professional guy, a leader. But if you were to draw it up, the versatility is great. But if you were to draw it up, and you have a new film room study on him on MileHighSports.com and on the YouTube channel right here, where does Jahdae Barron play? The instinct says he plays, ideally, opposite of Pat Surtain. Do you see anything different there?
I mean, he could, but I see his best fit right now is inside the nickel. And look, Ja'Quan McMillian, he's still on the roster, but he's not just going to be upended just like that. There's going to be some competition there. And obviously, training camp is just about, a month and a half, 2 months away from now. It's going to start a little bit earlier than it did last year. I can't give out the official date just yet. But the Broncos, they're very much, I think, going into training camp here saying, hey, we want to get this guy reps. They're going to rotate in Ja'Quan McMillian. They're going to rotate in Jahdae Barron. They're not only going to rotate him in the nickel, they're going to rotate him in on the outside as well. So, see some variance where he's going to get some reps with the first team defense, the second team defense. I don't think he'll get any reps with the third team defense at all. That's just not ideal. But the first and second team units, I mean, Denver's going to go into the season, make no mistake about it. Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Ja'Quan McMillian, Jahdae Barron. These guys are 4 guaranteed roster locks this upcoming season. So you're going to see that competition kind of play out between Barron and McMillian, and maybe a little bit of competition for Riley Moss and Barron. But the idea that the Broncos have here with him is just to be able to move him around a little bit. And it also, in return because of that, allows the Broncos to move Pat Surtain around, or to move Riley Moss around, Ja'Quan McMillian. I mean, Denver's got options and flexibility here depending on who they play. And I think with some of the teams that Denver's going to face this season, you're going to face a lot of passing offenses. You're going to need some good wide receiver rooms at that, including a rematch against Cincinnati. And so you want to be able to have a chess piece answer for that type of game plan there. It just allows them to be more unique with how they call up their defensive game plan. I think it allows them to be more aggressive. They play man coverage at a high rate already, but now it allows them to probably, even if you have an injury, to still be able to play man coverage. But I think you're going to see them play a little bit more zone as well, because they have guys at that position who have extremely high football IQs. And that's something I made kind of the comparison to when I did the film breakdown on Barron. It's up right now, milehighsports.com, also Mile High Sports YouTube channel, where we look at him against Michigan last season, and you see everything on display with where he lines up on the outside and the nickel, as a dime backer, as a safety. You see him do all that, come up against the run, play against the pass. He's got a unique set of skills that the Broncos simply couldn't pass up. And honestly, I'm surprised Miami did not pick him up with the 13th overall pick. I understand, they're in a position right now with Jalen Ramsey set to be traded, I think, at any point before or after June 1st. There's just a lot of moving pieces. I'm surprised Barron didn't land there, because that's where he was widely projected to go.
Yeah, in Barron's case too, it is fascinating because you're right. When you look at the AFC in the larger view, and you look at the AFC West, of course, we know Patrick Mahomes is there. We know that Justin Herbert is there. I learned the hard way, quite frankly, to just dismiss Geno Smith last year, who is turned himself into a pretty darn good quarterback in his second half of his career. And the correct answer of how many guys do you need to cover the pass is more. It's just more, right? However many you have, you can use more. The idea that Barron said he can also play safety in certain alignments. Do you see any of that? Do you see even any value in that?
I mean, as long as Talanoa Hufanga and Brandon Jones and PJ Locke, those guys are healthy, I don't see that necessarily being the case here. But, well, I mean, let's say they're in a dime situation. It depends on what type of dime personnel they want to roll out there, because there's also going to be times where Talanoa Hufanga is going to play that dime linebacker position as well. It just depends on is it a passing down? Is it passing personnel? So much is going to be contingent upon opponent, game plan, so on and so forth. But no, I primarily see him playing the dime backer. I see him playing the nickel. I see him playing outside from time to time, really just matchup contingent here for the Broncos. If there's an injury at the safety position, I think we could see him float around there from time to time, but it's not just going to be, that's not going to be the emphasis, because internally, from what I can tell you, the Broncos, they want to see JL Skinner take another step forward here. Having a guy like Barron, I think, is just for the safety position in question right here. It just gives them an insurance policy there if there's a string of injuries there. But primarily, it's going to be corner, it's going to be dime backer, it's going to be the nickel. You're going to see him play in those spots there. That's the primary emphasis for him right now. Maybe some special teams, but I think right now, I mean, everyone's forgetting about the Broncos cornerback room as is. Going into it, you have second-year player Chris Abrams-Drain, who's going to be expected to take on a little bit of a bigger role this season. We saw him play well defensively last year when he stepped into a limited sample size, but primarily you want him to emerge and play a lot of special teams this upcoming season. He's going to compete with Damari Mathis, who's entering the final year of his deal in Denver on his rookie contract. And Damari's got he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he's excited about being able to go out there at training camp and be able to bring that forth. But he's still very much in the mix as well. So right now, Denver's cornerback depth, Shawn, it's in a really good spot. They've got good depth, and they plan on going into camp with it how it is. And obviously, they got some other guys like Quentin Newsome and Reese Taylor. Taylor projects to be a little bit more of a nickel player there. So, just the odds are for Reese Taylor to make the 53 are going to be very hard, but they liked him, enough for him to make the practice squad last season. Same thing with Quentin Newsome. And in today's NFL, Shawn, you can never have enough corners. You need them on your active roster. I think Denver's going to be very heavy at that position once we get to the 53, but that's a long ways away from now. But Denver likes their cornerback room going into things.
I like that you brought up Chris Abrams-Drain, who brings a lot of the same versatility, right? I mean, that was the idea with Abrams-Drain. We know he's got really good closing speed. He's got good hands. There's a lot to like about that as well. But when you look at Riley Moss, third-round pick, Ja'Quan McMillian, undrafted college free agent, not that that matters. At the NFL level, one of the great parts about it is when you eventually get up there, it is mostly a meritocracy. They don't care. Whoever was the best of the job gets the job. But Jahdae Barron is the reigning Jim Thorpe winner. He took that from Travis Hunter, about the only award that Travis Hunter was up for that he didn't get, and that's for the best defensive back in football. When you start looking at a first-round pick with that bona fides that played in the SEC against that competition, you're going to assume that that guy is a future, not only starter, but maybe even a star. When you look at Barron, how quickly could that happen? And who on the Broncos backfield are the people that he could jump soonest?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could happen instantly, but I think the expectation, obviously being a first round pick, is always going to be high for that player. But for Jahdae and for the Broncos, I mean, they're not worried about any of that. They love the fact that they have a really good cornerback room right now. And look, if anything, like I said, I think the spotlight will be on Jahdae Barron versus Ja'Quan McMillian in training camp for that nickel spot there. Ja'Quan has shown that he can play here in the NFL. He's been such an impressive young player for the Broncos, considering his journey. But I mean, he's got the ability to play inside and outside. Riley Moss can play inside and outside. Jahdae can play inside, outside. Pat can move around and play inside, outside as well. This is something that Jim Leonard, I mean, even last year when I was speaking to Leonard at a press conference, kind of right before everything began for the preseason, the one thing he told us is, you can't, offenses try to move guys around so much in today's game that it tries to isolate and get away from your matchups. He said in today's NFL as a DB, you can't hide. You got to be able to move everywhere in today's game. And so all of his defensive backs at corner have to play inside, outside. At the safety position, you're not just designated a strong safety or a free safety. You have to be able to play in the box. You have to be able to play the middle of the field. Both of those positions have to be able to do the opposite there in that situation. Same thing goes with the defensive line. I mean, that is really the mentality of this defense is nobody's just pigeonholed into one spot unless you're really an inside linebacker. But, you can make the argument, you got to have guys that know how to play the weak side backer. You got to have guys that can play the Mike. So that's how Denver's defense is formulated here. But I'd say if I have to give a guess right now, I think primarily Ja'Quan McMillian and obviously Jahdae Barron will probably be on the spotlight for competition here at this position to open up training camp in July.
The Broncos added unexpectedly maybe more defensive pieces than people thought, although some of that also has to do with special teams. Yeah. When you look at the defense as it stands, what do you think they're still missing? And when you look at special teams, we know they lost Tremont Smith, but they added some draft pieces to do that. When you look at kick coverage and when you look at the defense, knowing the Broncos addressed both, what do those units still need?
I mean, it's hard to say right now because defensively, I look at maybe you have question marks at line. I don't think they're missing anything. I think they have question marks at linebacker, right? Obviously we know Dre Greenlaw popped up with a quad. It's strain. That's going to hold him out several weeks. He should be ready to go for training camp. But, you got Drew Sanders, who's coming back to that position essentially after spending a year at off-ball linebacker, tore his Achilles last year, was an off-ball linebacker his rookie season before making the switch to edge rusher. So this is a guy who's trying to relearn a position all over again. Alex Singleton's coming off of an ACL injury, but, he's fully ahead. He's going to be ready to rock and roll. No limitations from what I understand going into training camp. So that's going to be good there. You do have Lavelle Bailey, who made the 53-man roster as an undrafted rookie free agent last year. And then, you got some other UDFA guys that have some athletic traits to them as well that you're going to see a little bit of a look at. We're going to get a look this week here. Shawn, I'll be at Broncos rookie minicamp. I don't know if they're going to have us out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but they are going to have us out at least one of those days this upcoming week. So I'll have full stuff and coverage up at milehighsports.com. We'll get a look at that. But I think that their depth is in a good spot. I love the depth move that they added with Savion Jones out of LSU. And in my opinion, I just did something about this as well in Locked On Broncos that'll air tomorrow, is that for Savion Jones, this is a guy who could play right away, not necessarily as your starter. You got John Franklin Myers, you have Zach Allen. Those guys are the starters this upcoming season, but maybe he pushes Jordan Jackson in competition. Worst case scenario, okay, you have two defensive ends, Jordan Jackson and Savion Jones, who can rotate in and give Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers a little bit of a breather from time to time. I mean, he's got good size to him, 6'5". You put on the cleats, probably 6'6". He's disciplined. He's got a high motor. Not necessarily a speed rusher, but he's a power rusher who's disciplined, keeps good contain. I'm excited to see his fit here as well. Q Robinson going to be buried a little bit on the depth chart defensively in terms of being able to get on the field in a pass rush situation. You have one injury there at that position. It opens things up, but special teams primarily for him. I loved what Denver did in terms of just adding crucial depth and guys that they're looking forward to, becoming core four special teams guys. You mentioned Tremont Smith's departure. There's going to be competition there. Who's going to be the jammer? Who's going to be the gunner? I think Chris Abrams-Drain is the early guy to watch right here as being the favorite to get those first opportunities. But then again, Darren Rizzi, new special teams coordinator here in Denver. He's going to evaluate everybody with a clean slate. So everyone's going to get reps, but I would say I'd keep an eye on Chris Abrams-Drain for maybe replacing Tremont Smith in some of those key special teams roles.
Last one for you, Cody. For people who we get into the off-season schedule, obviously, when we have rookie mini camp coming up, explain to people what that is, if you would, because I think people hear it mini camp and they're thinking it's training camp, but all the
No.
rookies. It's a little less dramatic than that.
Yeah, no, it's very less dramatic. It's really just watching guys do drills on air. You get some competition because now this starts to transition really into phase 2 of the offseason program where, you can have helmets, you can have jerseys, but a lot of it is instructional work. It's not live fire. It's not live contact. You're going to see individual drills. You're going to see special teams instruction. You're going to see a lot of bag work so far for that. So really it's nothing to be like, oh yes, we're going to see this. We're going to find out right away if this guy's going to be an absolute game changer. No, this is more so, hey, these guys are getting into the building. They already are in the building for the most part. Obviously, as the team's voluntary offseason program is ongoing as we speak, but you get these guys onto the field, and now it's a chance for the coaching staff to give that early on instruction, right? Because now as you're going to transition deeper into phase 2, phase 3 of the offseason program, now you get into more coaching. Now you get into that stuff. And obviously with the new coaching staff, some guys that Shawn has brought in, you're going to have new position coaches this year. It's also a time for them to be able to see, okay, hey, do we like our processes? Shawn's always evaluating whether or not the process that they're doing is effective, efficient, because one thing he wants to do, he doesn't want to waste time. He doesn't want to waste minutes out there on the field. He's very much on board with, we have, let's say hypothetically, 75 minutes of getting workout here. We want to maximize it. Obviously, you have your built-in breaks, water breaks, but ideally, how can we maximize the 75 minutes, let's say we're allowed on the field? That's the process here, and it's getting these younger guys up to speed and getting them into the playbook a little bit for your installs and going through that. And then once you actually have mandatory minicamp, when the veterans are there, everything ramps up, and those guys are expected to be ahead of where they were initially here in rookie minicamp. So welcome to the NFL. Rookie is the approach here for rookie minicamp.
Yeah, we'll find out more about that. Of course, follow Cody Roark for all of the latest with minicamp coming up as the Broncos training camp will be here before you know it. I mean, it's going to come up pretty quick, and obviously a much anticipated season for the Denver Broncos. Cody hosted the Locked On Broncos podcast. Of course, you catch him right here on the Film Room, and you catch him on this program every week and everything at Mile High Sports. Download that app while you're at it. Get it all in your pocket so you can check it out at any time. Cody, thanks so much.
Appreciate you, Shawn. Catch you next time.